So as we move on to the slightly more mutable layer, but still sort of a big deal, things that you don't want to change too often, but you could. Right? It's not like knocking down some 2x4s, but it's got some solidity to it. So web policy, my favorites. Legal, compliance-related, editorial, technical constraints. That's different than enabling rules that tell you what version XML, what version, whatever, that sort of thing. Those are standards. These are just like, thou shalt be accessible. Thou shalt be, well, when you think about corporate governance and corporate policy and HR policy and fiscal policy, it doesn't tell you how to run the bookkeeping system, right? And so why should policy about the web tell you exactly how to run the content management system? That's an execution function. And the people who set policy in your organization, they don't know enough to tell you how to run that, and you don't want them to. So prying them apart, I think, is very important. And obviously, it's going to set the tone by your web operational guiding principles, right? So it's going to take those guiding operational principles that you've written in strategy and kind of translate them into in the ground. This is really what this means here. It's going to keep us from getting sued, right? It's going to keep us from breaking the law. If you're regulatory, heavily regulated industry, there's all sorts of things that need to fit in there. So there's one point that I like to bring out, and this is also in the paper that's on the drive, that I like to tease out about the impact of the web on corporate policy. And I think it really elevates the web profession into something new other than just thinking about standards all the time. Which is there's 3 different types of things that I think you need to look at in the policy arena because of the web. Right? So I like to say the reason why everybody gets so annoyed or moved by the web all the time is because it really is the digital manifestation of your organization. And it has, in the space of 10 to 15 years, made infrastructure, technical, ITE functions, instead of just play this supporting role, play this very primary role. So when somebody's first encounter with your organization is digital instead of physical world, right? Remember the old clicks and bricks that nobody talks about anymore, right? Now they're clicking and then bricking instead of bricking and then clicking, right? And it seems like a small difference, but it's a huge one for the organization because it means that people who know how to do the click stuff sort of are starting to have more important jobs than the people who do the brick stuff. And so that's a huge corporate change. And so you can see it manifesting itself in the sense of policy. So sure, there's 3 different ways you need to think about policy. There's from the bottom up, there's a new policy that you have to create because the web is here. Great example of that is social media policy, right? That's a no-brainer. Then the other one is there are existing policies that you have that might have to do with document management, records retention, accessibility that were there pre-web that are now impacted, right? So you might have to go in and revise them. But here's the one that people don't get, which is there's probably all kinds of corporate policy in your organization that you think have absolutely nothing to do with the web that need to be changed because the way you disseminate information or process or do that transaction has been so impacted because of the existence of the web. And that's when your job goes from being web person to corporate. And so I think that's a transformation that we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years as this digital manifestation takes primacy over the physical aspects. So I think that's, which takes us out of web, but I think kind of interesting. The third piece of it is web standards, and that's the paint. That's the stuff that you can change all the time if you wanted to. It's specific parameters and limits and exceptions for web product development. It's very easy. It's their standards. It's what most people think of when they're thinking about policy and those sorts of things. How exactly do you get stuff done? Right? And I want to lean in on standards a little bit because I think it's relevant with the things that the Vimosa folks are going to talk about as well later on. So here's Lisa's way of parsing out standards. This is not set in stone. In fact, I don't think I'm exactly right about anything. I think putting things in a framework and classifying them as useful to help you understand how they work doesn't have to work exactly like this as long as things are addressed. But when we look at the various standards family, I like to parse them out into 4 camps. And mostly the reason why I've parsed them out this way is they have similar organizational inputs and decisions paradigms. What, you say? Similar organizational inputs and decisions paradigms? I was just thinking about that this morning. Editorial and design tends to have a lot of input from lots of people in the organization and then a decision making on the communications, Marcom, PR side, right? Network and server infrastructure tends to have a lot of input from people around the organization and then a decision making on the IT information technology side, right? In the middle is where we run into trouble. Who gets to decide about linking strategy, information architecture, taxonomy, and other various odd web-specific things that are kind of technical, but kind of communications related? And who gets to decide about web tools and applications, what kind of portal, search engine do we use, applications, which social media tools do we use and how do we use them? Who gets to decide about those things? Those are the things that tend to be fought about over and over and over again. So figuring out, and these, the trends that I find in this middle here is a lot of folks are either pushing these out a different way, maybe separating web tools and applications into different camps, or taking information architecture and pushing it over to design and editorial, unless they have a really, really structured content authoring type environment, in which case they move it back over closer to web tools and applications because it's very married to a system that it's working with. So it's very, very personal. But I think what you really see going on with these two middle pieces, and this is a heyday, hallelujah for us, which is that's web expertise. So the stuff over there, that actually is communications expertise, and maybe we ought to let them have it. And that stuff over there, that maybe is IT expertise, and maybe we ought to let them have it. And most web people are nested inside either an IT-focused or a communications-focused team. If they're lucky, they might be standalone. So I think there's a strong argument to take that stuff in the middle and say, this isn't marketing or PR, this isn't IT, this is web, and that's a competency. That's an actual, real, distinct type of thing. Understanding how to structure and disseminate information, massage it into tools, get it into templates, tag it, get it to peer down multi-channels, all these sorts of things. That's neither marketing or IT. So, but there's usually some interesting inputs and decisions in there.